Welcome back to Kintsugi Heroes, helping people tell the stories they need to share so you can find the stories that you need to hear. In this episode, John Millam is joined by Shay Hare, who, from the young age of 13, turned to gambling as a way to cope with deep-rooted insecurities and family turmoil. Raised in a gambling-influenced environment, Shay battled addiction for years, finding both temporary relief and deeper entanglement. His turning point came at 28 when a relapse sparked the realization that he needed help. Through a combination of recovery programs and a newfound spiritual insight, Shay transformed his life, and today he focuses on helping others by promoting open discussions about gambling and mental health, advocating for understanding and healing through sharing personal stories. Enjoy this conversation with Shay Hare.
So, ladies and gentlemen and listeners of Kintsugi Heroes, welcome to another podcast, another episode of Kintsugi Heroes Stories That Matter. I'm going to ask you to welcome our guest today, a young man who has had association with causes and activities that are about service that we've been involved in over the years. And he's bringing a unique story, a story about some stuff that's a real challenge for Australian community in particular. I know it's a worldwide challenge, but where gambling has been a part of his life, and now he works in the community to help others with this addiction. Welcome, if you will, Shay Hare.
Thank you, John. Thanks, John. I appreciate the warm introduction.
A warm introduction, mate, because you're a warm guy, right? You are personable and upbeat and positive, but of course, there's a story behind it, right? Lived experience it brings you there, and so that positive persona that you present to the world is at the end of a journey with a whole bunch of challenges, right? So if you're okay, we might explore some of that, starting with what was the young Shay, was he interested in gambling as a kid?
Yeah, it's interesting. Probably an interesting answer. I'll start with just I just had a reflection that as you're sort of talking about my nature, and I appreciate those words of how I show up in the world, and I like to pride myself on being quite positive and joyful and bubbly. But I was just thinking then, as you're saying that, it's actually really nice to be able to embody that part of my personality, but truthfully embody it and it not be a mask, because for so long it was a mask, and it was just hiding everything underneath.
So did you learn to present positively because you knew underneath there were all sorts of things that were unresolved and bubbling around, right?
Well, I think we go through stages. I think there were stages where I was completely unconscious of what was under the hood, so to speak. And then, there are also stages of life where I was very aware what was under the hood, so I put on a facade. And I think, that facade was built very early on as a kid to hide the truth. And then if I go deeper than that, well, why was I hiding the truth? Was the truth allowed to be expressed? Probably not. At times, yes, as a kid, the truth was allowed to be expressed. But I think for a large part of my childhood, I hid a lot because I think I didn't feel completely safe showing all parts of me and expressing all parts of me. And as humans, we all have parts. We all have messy parts. We all have dark parts. We all have a shadow. I very, very much hid my shadow for a very long time. Yeah.
So a shadow part often, like if we sort of dive into IFS or whatever, family systems, the idea that was the shadow part comes up as a way of surviving, of protecting the core self, right? As a young bloke, what were you made unsafe? What were you trying to protect Shay from?
Very early on, I was quite an insecure kid. I was very insecure. I was very insecure about my appearance, and I was very insecure about people's opinions of me. And I was so caught up in self that I was just so self-absorbed in that. And, that then grew into, an unhealthy relationship with my body and all these other things that come up. And then I think, from a couple of things sort of happening in childhood, Dad left very early on. There was a lot of conflict in the house. There was a lot of emotional instability. I think around the age of like 11 and 12, I was starting to distract myself. So I was playing up. So there was a lot of pain inside me. There was a lot of anger inside me. Things that had happened that had just made me really, really angry and shy and scared and closed off to the world. And then I discovered gambling. I was 13 years old. My brother invited me to his mate's house. They were all playing poker. They were 18, 19 at the time, and I was 13. And I said, "Can I come?" And he said, "Well, it's a $5 buy-in. Do you have $5?" And I said, "I don't." So I asked Mum for $5. And I went and played. And they had this rule that if you got knocked out, you could buy back in. So like as a 13-year-old, being with my older brother and all of his mates, it was such a cool thing. And anyway, I got knocked out. I lost, and I was so frustrated. I was just like, "This sucks. Like this, I've just lost $5. It wasn't even my money." And then one of the boys said, "You can buy back in, but you got to now pay $10 if you want to have more chips and still have a chance to win." So I was like, "Oh, I'm in here." So I shooted back home. I ran home, and I asked Mum for $10, and got the $10. Went back up to the mate's house, my brother's mate's house, and I won the game of poker. And I'd never played before, and I won. I won like over $100 as a like 12, 13-year-old. That was like, oh, so good. And the high, John. The high from winning that game was like, I didn't do drugs growing up, but I can only imagine it was just like a drug addict getting a hit of drugs. It was so euphoric. It was so just amazing. And really beneath all of that, though, was just complete distraction and avoidance from all the pain that I was feeling as an angry kid. And that's it. That's in a nutshell. That is really what started the addiction.
It's interesting. When we talk to people who support, AOD, alcohol, other drug stuff, and gambling, right? They talk about these addictions as solutions, not as problems, right? And in some ways, right, are you telling me that like gambling for you was a solution to the insecurity and the lack of safety and the lack of recognition and attention?
I think that it's not just one thing, but I think, and some days it changes. Some days my interpretation of what it actually was changes because I'm still learning so much about myself and that version of me back then. But if I was to answer it truthfully, what my truth is right now, I would say incredibly low self-worth. Yeah. And that gambling made me feel significant, and it made me feel something, and it made me so that's in the moment, that's what I felt. So low self-worth, I felt great, I felt amazing. How good's this? How good's winning? Felt all these good highs after feeling all these low lows and being angry and frustrated. As the gambling evolved over time, it became different. So, it was used as a way, it was used in so many different ways. It was used as a way to try to pay off debt. It was used as a way to avoid. It became so many different things. But at that point in time, I would say it was all around low self-worth.
So how does a 13-year-old dive into gambling? How does it become an early teen hobby, right?
Yeah.
Like to be truthful, at 13, I wouldn't have known how to gamble, right?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I look back at, a lot of the memories aren't super clear, but there was very much a culture in the family around gambling. So like, my mum's father was massively into horses. Her brother still is to this day, massive. I'm not saying he's got a problem at all, but there was that. My brother was very much into it. My dad, I don't know the full story, but had a big problem with the pokies, to the point where, him and mum and dad split eventually, and I don't know how much of a contributing factor that was, but he had his addiction. So it was just there. I remember, like, in the back of the family home, we had a pokey machine. Like, there was a legit pokey machine. Those ones that you pull down, like no, but it was real. It was a real pokey machine. That just, you didn't have to, you had to put your 10 cents in, and then we had the key to get the money back out. So, you can only imagine what that's doing for the brain of a 7, 8, 9-year-old. The lights, it's all there, and it's
a crazy development program for kids, right?
And I remember sharing. I remember the very first time, we'll get to it eventually. I remember the very first time I fully took ownership with this, tried to get help. And I remember the guy that I was saying, I was getting a free service through, like, New South Wales, some New South Wales service. And he's just like, mate, the reality is some people have amazing lives, are stable, don't have any unresolved trauma, don't have self-worth issues, but form massive addictions because gambling is addictive. It's just addictive. It's designed to be addictive. And I think I look back at, like, pokey as a kid, I'm just like, you know what I mean? Even if life didn't throw me a few spanners, I may have formed an addiction anyway. I don't know.
As a kid, well, you just download what's around you. So, a sporting father has sporting kids, right? And they often follow in his footsteps in the same sport, which is, what it sounds like you've done, right?
Mm-hmm. For sure.
So, like, at what stage you mentioned reaching out for help, which is like a pretty sort of, self-aware thing to do. What stage did you realize, because as a 13, I wouldn't imagine you had a lot of discernment around, what was good for you or not, right?
I'm trying not to laugh. I was 28, John.
So a couple of years later, right?
And I think that's why my story is so powerful, because I suffered in silence for 15 years. And it's why I'm so passionate about gambling addiction, specifically in men, because I understand, and you know this better than anyone, men suffer in silence way more than females do. And I really do believe that the 2,500 men that die each year, gambling addictions play a part in that number. I'd be spitballing what the number is, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was close to 10%. It's a real thing. So one of my biggest problems is I'm a very self-aware human, sometimes too self-aware, but self-awareness doesn't do anything. It doesn't mean anything, or doesn't contribute to anything unless you take action.
Right. When you realize you might be aware of an issue, but you're still not changing the circumstance in which that issue presents, right? So, and sometimes self-awareness can be a bit of a pain. So, yeah. So tell me about the logistics of having a gambling addiction as a young person, going through, puberty, and then, school matriculation, right? All that period of time where you're developing relationships with the opposite sex, right? And sort of, maybe setting up your work career and so on. How did all of that occur? That's all usually plenty of challenge anyway, and you're doing it in the context of having this sort of cloud with you all the time. Is it fair to call it a cloud, or was it just a way of working? No?
My mum once said to me, as we talk about this, you'll start to learn that shame underpinned the whole addiction. And that was the block in me able to actually get help and overcome it, the shame energy. But at the start there wasn't shame, but my mum used to always say to me that life, you always have a backpack on. So Shay, you've always got this backpack, but every burden, every lie, everything you hold in, everything you don't share is just another pebble. And if you keep those things going and you keep not sharing and you keep lying and you keep hiding, the backpack will get so heavy. So but as soon as you share something or open up or tell the truth, the backpack gets lighter. And it's so true. It's so true. Like, we all have a conscience. So my backpack got pretty heavy pretty quick. So, you know, so to speak, the cloud, it was a cloud. It was heavy, and it wasn't always heavy because sometimes I was winning. So then there was no backpack.
Do you become good at gambling?
If I was good at gambling, I'd probably still be gambling. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'd still be, because I was in awe of it. I loved it. I was obsessed. Like, it started with poker, so I wanted to become a professional poker player. That was a legit dream. I was way too emotionally unstable to play poker, though. I would react too much to the hand before, and but yeah, what does it look like? You know, like a couple of stories. Year 8, had a couple of mates, and I think also it was the perfect storm because my other friends started gambling too. So there's a group of us now, like, you know, 13, 14, and, you know, we're going and we're playing online poker illegally with my mum's credit card. Like, I'm stealing my mum's credit card to play poker. Every day when I get off the bus, I'm sprinting home to beat mum home to find the ANZ statement to throw it out, because I know the statement comes monthly. Until one day I get caught. But that didn't stop me. I did it again, and I did it again. So, you know, it altered the complete trajectory and quality of my childhood, because there was so much lying, there was so much hiding, there was so much shame. I was so consumed. The highs were so high, the lows were so low. It ended relationships. It had negative impacts on relationships. It ended friendships. I have friendships that I still haven't repaired yet, based off my days of, like, I was a thief. I stole from people I cared about. And, you know, there's still energy of guilt there. I still hold that guilt. I've forgiven myself because I understand what I was going through, and, you know, I was doing the best I could with what I knew and all my problems and that I didn't know about at the time, and why I was drinking to blackout drunk and all these other things that were manifesting. But it had massive consequences. But in saying that, I wouldn't change it. Not one bit of it. I just wouldn't, because I'm here now and I have the perspective I have now.
I can understand, you know, who you are now, obviously, you know, includes that process and the learning from that process. So what were the gifts? You know, like, obviously gambling gave you something as well, right, which you're now accepting, right?
Well, firstly, it kept me safe, John.
Right.
You know, it was no different to, you know, and I use the drug addict reference because I see gambling just like a drug addiction. I don't see it any different, apart from, you know, the chemicals that you put in your body. It literally gave me relief, just like, you know, heroin gives someone relief on the street. It gave me relief from the pain and suffering. I had a lot of trauma, unresolved trauma. I went through a lot of abuse as a child that was suppressed and repressed for, you know, I'm 32 now, and I'm only just facing a lot of that trauma now that's coming up. And I for so long, I was just like, you know, how can this be? How can you repress something for 2 decades? And then, you know, I start reading and I read literature, and it's just so normal. People repress memories until they're 60 sometimes.
Yeah, 2 decades seems like a pretty short period. You know, some people, you know, rack up much more.
Now, I've gone on this, like, I went on this journey over the last couple of years where I was just like, I'm cleaning it out. I don't care what comes up. And it was this, like, desperate energy, because I understood that that's what was underpinning my whole life, or that I'd repressed to keep myself safe. It's only in the last, you know, probably 6 months where I've had to sit down and be like, well, hang on. Do I really need to look in every, you know, nook and cranny and try to resolve everything and understand everything and remember? It's like, let's just regulate. Let's just get your nervous system regulated. Let's just get yourself grounded. And if things come up, but there's no point looking around with a torchlight trying to find every trauma. That's just draining, and that's not how I want to live my life. So I'm in a much better space there. But yeah, like, to, you know, back to the question, that's what it did. It kept me safe, just like drugs keep a drug addict safe, and just like alcohol keeps an alcoholic safe. I've never met an alcoholic or a drug addict that had a cruisy upbringing. They just didn't. They just didn't. They didn't wake up and go to, you know, grade 2 and have a share circle and tell the group, oh, I can't wait to be a drug addict. No, they wanted to be a firefighter, or they wanted to go to the moon, or like, and then life hit them, and it hits us all. I just got dealt a hand that was pretty tough and pretty hard, and I found solace and safety in gambling.
I was listening to a man with a story who was worked closely with in a institution that supported Indigenous men with addictions, and he talked about asking what you are you, and they'd say, what's going on, and they'd say, oh, it's the drugs or the alcohol or the gambling, and he says, no, what's really going on, right? So that's not what's going on. That's what happens as a result of that, right? So you've got to go upriver.
For sure. Gabor Mate has got that really famous line around addiction and trauma, and it's like, not why the addiction's the wrong question, why the pain?
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah.
It's just such a better way of framing it.
Yeah. So what do you do? Like, you got to a point with, so you've been, from 13 to 28, 15 years of being someone that was feeding gambling as a solution for that trauma and that other stuff. How do you bring it all together? How do you get to 28 and you get some help and suddenly you're going, okay, I have to clear this out? How does that happen?
For me, you suffer so much for so long, you don't see any purpose or reason to want to be around anymore. Or you have that rock bottom moment, which I had. So I had that, I had suicidal ideology. I never went and brought the rope and planned the day and the letter or anything like that. But I feel like suicidal ideation, it's all on a spectrum. If you ever thought that you don't want to wake up and live today, you're on that spectrum. And I probably got to a 5, where I was like, I don't think I could do this anymore. But then it was just, it's that whole tipping point of just like, I can't keep doing this. There wasn't just this one moment or this one aha moment. Maybe there was actually. So when I was 28, I hadn't gambled for 3 or 4 months, so I was doing quite well. And this still blows my mind that this happened. Something happened. I can't remember what happened. Something happened that threw me emotionally. So someone said something or something threw me. And then all I remember is that thing happening and next minute being in my bed watching AFL, and I just put $500 on a game.
Wow.
Here I was 3-4 months doing so well, and it's almost like I was like complete autopilot, signed into my account, deposited the money, put the bet on so impulsively, and now I'm laying, and I was like, what the I'm like, this is a problem. This is a big problem. And then I remember winning. So I won. I think I won 2.5, $3 grand. And I was up here, cloud 9. I was like, oh my God, amazing. And then I bet all of that money pretty much instantly after and lost. And as it was losing and as I realized it was about to lose, I had this reflection of, I wanted to lose. I actually didn't even want to win. And then I realized that gambling actually had nothing to do with making money anymore. At times it did, but it was all about creating so much pain at times that I completely forgot about my life and everything else that life throws us. And it just became this safety nest of anger and frustration. And I was just so self-absorbed in that it was a weird way to create safety, but it was consistent. It was reliable. I could flick the switch. Yeah.
So the gain you were getting from the loss was like the emotional trauma and drama was really, wow, that's a powerful realization.
And then, that took a few months then to reflect back on that moment to be like, oh, I see what I was hiding from. I had other stuff going on in my life that was really heavy, and gambling was just this reliable vice to escape.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, what worked for you? So you're coming to a point, it sounds like it was, a series of accumulated stress and, reflections and so on, and at some point the pain of changing was less than the pain of staying the same.
Yeah.
What did you do at that point? What worked for you?
Well, I think I had that moment, and then I talk about shame a lot with addictions, but I shined the light on shame. I think the next day I picked up the phone and I found this free service, and I called, and it was so daunting. It was so uncomfortable. Like you can see how I talk about my addiction. I can laugh about it. I'm light about it. I don't care about it. It is what it is. But at the time, it was like crippling to pick up a phone and say, I've got an addiction. I need help. Like it was so uncomfortable, but I did it. And even though I relapsed after that, I was clean for a bit and then relapsed and whatever, that phone call was the starting point of shedding the shame, also shedding the light on the shame, which then allowed, just so much movement and progression with that journey. Yeah, so I just picked up the phone and asked for help. And I think, I even remember my victim mindset, John. I remember calling them and saying, we've got no one available for 6 weeks. Oh, this is like the one time I finally asked for help. And then I could have grabbed that and been like, it's not meant to be, I'll keep gambling. Whatever. Yeah. But I was just like, no, so, that was another big part of this journey, is just realizing how much of a victim I was.
Do you think you have to get, is there, some people sort of, jump on an issue or an addiction and they get they make changes and it seems to happen quickly. But others you hear of a long-term struggle with the process, right? Do you think you have to build up to solving this issue? Do you have to get a certain amount of pain, or get to rock bottom, or sort of develop enough social disasters behind you to get the credit to go and say, no, I'm going to make some changes?
I just think it's so circumstantial, based off the person and their wiring and their story and their beliefs and their community and their family around them, their support. I just feel it's, I thrived. I jumped into this 10-week program, and I remember the guy he's like a provisional psychologist, I think. He's like, you are doing this with flying colors. You are crushing this program. Because there was so much energy to just, I had 15 years of baggage of just I'm done. Let's go. Let's ace this. But then I relapsed probably a year after that, maybe a year after that. So yeah, I don't think I can truthfully answer that question. I just think it's so different for everyone. And, I've become quite spiritual in the last 12 months. Some people might not like this take, but I actually think that some souls come down to live this life to suffer an entire lifetime. Yeah. They didn't come to overcome the suffering and change and use it as a catalyst for growth. I think some souls are here to live a really hard life, and that's part of their soul's evolution. That wasn't mine though. I came here to suffer and then overcome.
Well, in many ways, right? Purpose comes from, Maya Angelou talks about. I've often said this. Find your purpose, look to your wound, right? In some ways, right? You have at various stages dived into sharing your recovery, your journey, your lessons, if you will, with the world, right? So why was that something that you had access to? Right?
Yeah, well, I think that's why I'm here. And I think that's why I went through everything I went through. That's not even I think. I know that's why I'm here. I know that. I know I came here to go through a lot of adversity and then shine the light for others, and for my light to hopefully inspire others to turn on their own light. Because I feel like I was reading this thing recently around healers and light workers, and that it only takes something like one light worker or one person shining their authentic light that one person can like outweigh or outbalance like 5,000 dark souls, or people that are dark and suffering and struggling and
Storm
that
clouds.
energy. Yeah, storm clouds.
Little people run around in a storm cloud. Right.
For sure. But if you think about that, 1 to 5,000, and it's like that's a pretty big spin. So I think, if I go back to mentoring men, where we first met, and I think a lot of that was from pain. A lot of that sharing was from I was in pain and I was angry, and a lot of it was the ego. Like, to be honest, a lot of it was ego. There was a lot of ego around doing this thing and being the face of something and driving it and getting significance from it, and that's why I threw it away a couple of years ago, because I'm just like, this isn't authentic. This isn't real. I'm not doing this, even though it was having a net positive impact, raising money for a good cause. It wasn't my truth at the time. So, I think I'm just, I'm here to share, believe in humanity. If you focus on the dark, you focus on the news, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You'll keep getting it. You'll keep attracting more of it. But I truly believe that the power of the human spirit and the soul is just untapped, and just, it's incredible. And I just want to share that light and love with as many people as I can.
Beautiful purpose. If I can just backtrack a little bit into that period, beginning of COVID, you're signing up to mentoring men, and of course, a brilliant concept, 25 to 0. So the idea of bringing attention and resources to suicide, right? Which is, we're looking to, reduce suicide, which was and you became, quite an effective spokesperson and fundraiser, right? Of course, you spoke briefly about your own ideation, right? And, bereavement. I think you had a friend who, suicided, and that really drove that organisation. How do you, you put up and you create all of this energy and stuff? Does it feel worthwhile? Does it feel like a good process?
Well, firstly, I don't see gambling as negative or positive, good or bad. I see it as a solution. Maybe not ideal. It's a solution. I think, it's actually a really good question. I think I wasn't processing the pain. I was so out of whack with my body. I was so disconnected to my feelings, that I really, even though I wanted to try to process the trauma of losing this coworker, I just couldn't. And that desperate energy, because when I came into it, there was so much energy. I was full of energy, full of let's go, let's raise money, let's like boom, 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 boom. And I think it was coming from pain. So, good, bad, was it positive? Yeah, of course it was positive in ways, but I think in other ways as well, it was a coping mechanism. And it was a bit of a distraction. Because at that point in time, I was working a full-time job, was trying to drive that. I think I just started trying to do some study. I had all this other stuff going on in my life, personal stuff. Like it was, and that, if you really look at the theme of my life, that was the theme of my life, distracting myself.
When every minute's filled with the stuff you don't need to be with yourself, right?
Oh, but like, and this is like, I get emotional thinking about this, because it's like, if at one point in your life it was so unsafe to actually feel and be with yourself, of course you're going to do whatever it takes to distract yourself.
Yeah.
And that's why I have so much empathy for workaholics and overworkers and addicts and all of this, because I get it. I get why they're doing it. And I don't judge anyone, regardless of how dysfunctional their behavior is, because I understand it's serving a purpose. Doesn't mean it's ideal, and it doesn't mean that I don't want them to find change in their life, but I can just understand it now.
Beautiful. I love that. So, the purpose to share and care and make a difference, right? So, from the energy of your, awareness or your recovery, if you will, right? You channeled that into coaching and sort of, and programs. How did that come about? How did you decide you wanted to become a worker in that space, right?
Yeah, 2018, 2019, I'm at a friend's house and he's like, I've got this documentary, I reckon you'll like it. Pretty close to rock bottom at that point, just separated from a long-term partner, debts through the roof, gambling's out of control, doing all of these naughty things. And he sits me down and he shows me this documentary called Tony Robbins, I'm Not Your Guru.
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember it well.
And I watch it and I was like, wow. And something just lit up inside me. And, that was, 7 years ago now. And then that was it. That was, in that moment, I realized that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. Didn't know what it was going to look like or how it was going to take shape, but I realized I wanted to help others in their own suffering for the rest of my life.
In that moment, right, where you choose a pathway, does it sort of echo that moment of winning?
Well, that's an interesting one, because I think at the time I still had so much going on in my life that I couldn't actually sit there, ground, and be embodied with the idea of this is what I want to do with my life. It was just a thought. And it was also like he saved my life. Like, I have no doubt that watching him do his thing and doing it from heart and not ego was like I have no doubt. And there's 3 or 4 figures actually around that time that I used to follow that, like, I'd love to sit down with them one day and be like, all 5 of you saved my life, because I consumed your content like there's no tomorrow. Like, I was in this bubble from then until probably 2023, 2022 of just like, that became an addiction. Self-help.
Yeah. In some ways, we look at 12 steps and it's transferring your energy from something that is causing problems to being more positive, but it's that same energy.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. So no, it didn't. In that moment, it didn't give me this big thing, this big rush, this big excitement. It actually just gave me hope. It was more hope. Gave me hope. Yeah.
What as a coach, right? So obviously you trained, like you launched into it and you immersed into the bubble. What did you take out of it that resonated with your lived experience as a gambler? What did you realize there was, was going to help people, in your situation?
If I'm being honest, nothing. There isn't a single strategy that I've actually, I think, ever used on a client. It's more just been my embodiment of me. And if I'm not judging myself, I know that I can't judge them, even if there's no progress or even if they know they go backwards. Or if I have full space for just complete acceptance and understanding of me, I'm going to be able to hold that space for them. I think, there are probably unconscious things I do with clients that I don't realize I'm doing that I've learned through, as I mentioned, I think off air, like trained through Tony and Tony's techniques and strategies. It's probably things I do unconsciously. But really, it just comes down to truly deeply caring about their world and not trying to be like, I think you should do this. Because they know they've got the answers. Everyone's got the answers. And, it's just this is why, mentoring men was such a hoot and such a success, because it's just like people just want to be heard. They know that their addiction's not helping their life. It's not going to allow them to achieve these things. And it's not. They just want to be heard and understood.
I love that. Having say someone who's struggled with his weight over the years, and being able to string a word or two and read a word or two. I always find it interesting that skinny people who have never been fat a day in their life always have lots of advice for fat people, right? You just have to eat this, so you just have to change that. And of course, it must be frustrating that the world, is reaching out, is telling somebody who's struggling with gambling, right, which entwines itself into the psyche and solves a whole range of primary and secondary issues, right? For someone who's never struggled with something to just go, oh, stop gambling.
That was a big part of my journey. Like my family didn't get it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to generalize my whole family. There was better advice than others, but my mum's capacity was she couldn't deal with it. She couldn't understand it. And I understand that she went through her own trauma with my father and what he went through. So I get it. She was just watching this happen again. But there wasn't a lot of understanding, or I guess desire to truly want to understand what was going on with Shay. Like, what was Shay really struggling and suffering with? But I also think to a certain extent I didn't know what I was struggling and suffering with either. And I was a closed book, and I hid and everything from them. So they used to tippy toe on eggshells around me because, I kind of forced their hand to do that. So I don't have any resentment or judgment or anything like that towards my family. They were doing the best they could with what they knew.
I found it fascinating. You were saying, the modalities, the tools, right? We often look for those kind of, practical sort of mechanistic solutions, right? The red pill or the blue pill.
Makes our brain happy.
Yeah, exactly, right? And particularly men looking for those kind of, practical solutions, right? Just apply, 2 twists and then, and a squirt of WD-40. But I found it fascinating. You were essentially saying it's, sitting with somebody and just accepting them and listening and caring, right, is the power place, right? That's so challenging to do. How do you build up a desire to offer, to be vulnerable in that space when you're coming from a place where you've spent your entire life trying to protect and hide?
I'll tell you a quick story. I read a book, started reading a book called Learned Optimism, maybe 3 years ago now. And third of the way through the book, there's a series of like 8 tests. And you would consider me an optimistic person back then when we first met? Yeah. So would I, truthfully. I truthfully would have said, I'm an optimistic human, always glass half full. And I did this test, and it doesn't just look at optimism as, are you optimistic? Are you not optimistic? It's like, are you optimistic in this perspective, in that lens, in that environment, in that, and it breaks it all down. And of the 8, I was only optimistic in one of them. And of the other 7, I was not just like neutral, I was like a pessimist. And I think I've adopted that from I know I've adopted that from my mother. She's like that with a lot of things in her life. And so that then sent me on a journey of realizing, oh, wow, I really don't actually like myself. I say I do. There are parts of myself that I like, but there are a lot of parts of myself that I don't like. There are a lot of parts of myself that I'm ashamed about. So what did I do to be able to get to the space, to be able to then hold space for that, that person next to me is like, and it's still a work in progress. I sat in the dark. I just sat in the dark and looked in the mirror and just, I did that through therapy and I did that through, other modalities. But the real gold, or the growth, so to speak, was me at home going through some emotional turmoil and not gambling, or not watching pornography, or not picking up my phone, or not having a drink of alcohol, and just sitting in it. And once I did that, I just learned so much about myself. Yeah, I would say psychedelic therapy with my therapist also was one of the biggest catalysts for change. Because for someone that had so much shame, I was full of shame energy. So I had so much shame around me, and it was so stuck and sticky and stagnant because it'd been there for so long. And my ego just wanted to hold on to it and keep it forever. And I remember I did MDMA therapy with my therapist. And I'm not sure if you've ever taken MDMA or you know the effects of MDMA. It makes you feel very, very good, and it expands your heart. And I'd never taken the drug. I didn't really do drugs at all growing up. And I remember taking it, and it was just, the only way I can explain it is if the shame was in every part of my being, it was now outside of my body, and I had separation from it, and I could see it, and I could speak to it, and I could love it, and I could understand why it was there. And then through that process, that was a couple of years ago now, I could integrate all of those lessons from that psychedelic journey. Yeah.
When you say like yourself, is it actually liking yourself, or is it acceptance, right? Is it like where you can say, hey, I don't have to like an addiction, but I have to really accept that it was part of me and that it was,
So I like that question. Are you familiar with Peter Crone?
Oh, yeah, I've seen, yeah.
Yeah, so Peter said something. I'm a massive Peter fan. I'm going to meet him one day. I can't wait to meet him one day. Peter said something that really hit me, and it was loving the parts of yourself that you don't love. So, for example, if there was a part of me that was full of shame that I didn't like or I hated, rather than just loving that part, love the part of you that hates. Like, I love the part of me that doesn't like that part. I still have love for that part. And it's like, I remember watching that and I was just like, oh. I just felt so much. And I think it's just, we get so caught up in us. If we can just take a step back and zoom out and just have complete compassion for all of it, we find peace.
Is changing your relationship to the world and gambling, is that a cure?
Yeah, well, I think even just the term, I'm really particular with language, so even the term cure is implying that there was a disease or something wrong beforehand.
Yeah, very true. Yeah.
And I don't believe in that world. I don't see the world through that lens. Sorry. I just think there's complete freedom, complete peace, and complete acceptance of oneself, or there's not. And I think the whole purpose of this journey as a human being is to free ourselves of those constraints and those limitations and those things that keep us in prison, in emotional prison. And that's just the way I look at it. I think like love, light, peace, and freedom. And it might sound a little bit woo-woo or a bit airy-fairy. I'm like, no, that's who we are. That's at our core. When we came out of the womb, that's who we were. When we were 3 years old, dancing, not caring about what people thought. When we were naked and we didn't care about the tummy rolls or we didn't care. Then life happened. So I think there's so much. I just think the messaging around what it is to be a human can sometimes, we just get caught up in it. And I think COVID's been great because people have started to open their eyes and realize that there's more to life than career success, owning a home, owning land. It's like, I live up in Mullumbimby, which is like 15 minutes inland of Byron. I had a lovely encounter with a lady the other day, and she's just like, oh, come out to my house, got a beautiful property, you can come walk my track anytime. She's like, it's not my land. I own it, but it's not my land. And it's like, it's so true. Like, none of this is ours. Like, none of it. I just think, for me anyway, there's no cure. It's just getting back to who we truly are, which is love, light, peace, and freedom.
So there's no need for a cure. It's just a different choice on the day. Yeah, right. So,
well, when you say there's no need because I'm curious here. When you say there's no need for a cure, what do you mean by that?
Well, in that there's nothing to fix, right? At the time, a solution, it seemed like a good idea at the time. and now there are other ideas and options to take, and I just choose something different.
Yeah. But it kind of hit home with me what you just said. Like, it's like there was nothing wrong with you in the first place. There's nothing wrong with any of us.
No, absolutely. It's like, the myth of mental illness, right? It's not, being sad or as a child, developing strategies to keep yourself safe, regardless of what they are, is just advanced living, right? It's amazing talent. A child can keep safe by choosing something they find or can develop, right? It's kind of emotional MacGyverism, like I can take a matchbox and two strings and turn it into an emotional safety zone, right? And unfortunately, it's not their fault that it's based on a sort of manipulative model put in there by other forces that don't have your best intentions at heart.
For sure. And like, people go through inhumane, horrible things that are so traumatic, and the body disassociates when that happens. Yeah. The body has such intelligence that it disassociates, and it's like, do you know what? We're going to get you out of here. This isn't safe.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
And it's wild. And that doesn't mean that it doesn't come with ramifications post that incident happening. But it's just, the intelligence of the body is just, it's wild.
And I love that idea of tapping back into that intelligence, that resourcefulness, those strengths, and the experience that you've learnt from, to choose to develop other options. The shame seems to lock us off from our own strengths to deal with things.
Everything's such a paradox. It's like I was talking before. You were talking about the cure, and I'm like, well, there's no cure because if there's nothing wrong with you. That's one lens to look at it through. Another lens that I like to look at it through is, well, the cure is shining light on the shame. And I truly believe, and I've spoken about this a lot with suicide. I truly believe that if a let's just talk about a male, because that's where you and I
we have more experience with being male than anything else. So
for sure. But just take a male. If we go back to that suicidal spectrum that I was talking about before, male's at a 9. He's ready. He's ready to go. I truly believe that if that male just expressed to one human being, whether it be a stranger or someone they just expressed, and all they expressed was, "Hi, I'm John, and I'm thinking about ending my life." I just think just that one. Not I need help, not I need talk me out of it, not I just need you to know that I'm thinking of ending my life. This life that I'm in right now, I'm thinking of ending it. Just that, like, and then, my head goes down a rabbit hole of like, well, how do we encourage more men to do that? Because I truly believe that if you do that and you voice it, that 9 out of 10 has just dropped so dramatically. Because how many people have taken their life and there were no signs, none. It's like, what if that one person just said it once?
Yeah.
Just once. But it's like, how do you, and it comes back to shame. There's still so much shame around suicide, just in general. So I just think the whole earth, this whole planet, just needs a lot of love and light, because there's just shame everywhere. There is shame everywhere. And it's not who we are. We're not shame.
Really love that idea, right? It's not, you're not debasing, you're not sort of prostrating yourself, you're not admitting weakness or whatever. In fact, that question is just, drips strength, right? Just, being able to share that, like, it feels strong. It feels like, it's a warrior kind of question, right? So, whether, regardless of where it comes from, just opening up to that feels like, courage walking. It's really an interesting idea, and I really love it. The idea of, so, you promoted, awareness around suicide and men's responses to suicide. But what do we need to do to invite men to explore that kind of radical candor and courage, right, in action. How, what's your thoughts around that?
Oh, well, it's hard, hey, because it's like I always play devil's advocate. Like I think of the male out there that's about to do it. I think of the male that did it yesterday, and there's a male that's probably going to do it today. Like it's just in Australia.
Well, we know 8 of them will likely by the end of the day not be around.
Well, there you go, exactly. And I think of them, and then I play devil's advocate because I'm just like, for all I know, their upbringing was so brutal that it's like you don't ever show vulnerability, ever. And if you do, you're out of the house. Like, I didn't grow up in an environment like that, but I know some people do. So the idea of sharing that is almost impossible for them. But it's not impossible. It's almost impossible. So my message doesn't go out to that person. My message more so goes out to everyone else that all has a role to play in decreasing this number. And that is if someone says to you, I'm thinking of taking my life, you sit them down and you say, tell me about your life. And that's it. Just tell me what's going on. And not for 1 second do you tell them that everything's going to be okay or that you can fix it. You just sit there and listen. That's it. Because even by saying everything's going to be okay, it'll all get better, you're just invalidating them. Because in their eyes, in their world, it's not. And I just think as a culture, we're too quick to try and fix. And it comes from a good place. So it's not like it's coming from a bad place. It's coming from a good place. I just think we need to be better at just listening. And it sounds so simple. And for the person out there, try it somewhere else. Try sharing something that maybe isn't as crippling as the idea of sharing that, and just see how it feels. And like I said about my mum and the analogy of the backpack and the pebbles, you just share it. You just share it.
Just start lightening the load and see where it takes you.
Yeah, you stay in your head, you're dead. Whether that be physically or emotionally, like if you just stay in your head, you're dead. Like I've been ruminating the last couple of days over a couple of things, and just the rumination, it's just, get me out of here. I've got to talk about this to someone. It's just not fun. It's not fun.
Yeah. Brilliant advice. A wonderful take on it. Where are you going with your journey in helping people and sort of unlocking some sort of future place where you continue to learn and whatever's ahead?
Yeah. Well, the learning will never stop. I'm the more I learn, the more I realize I know nothing, and the more I think I've figured it out, the closer I am to not realizing I've figured it out. But where am I at? I've got a lot of passion for a lot of different things. I think right now for me, it's all about alignment. So for a while there, I just wanted to try to coach everyone and help everyone, and realized that I want to work with people that light me up. I want to work with people that make me feel excited and that I feel like I'm a match with. I think I want to do some stuff around gambling and prevention. I actually spoke to my reflexologists the other day, and I was telling her about this opportunity to do this gambling stuff and go out and talk in schools and sporting clubs. But I'm like, it just doesn't feel right. And she's just like, and she said to me, she's like, it's because gambling's not a problem. There's potentially deeper work out there to be done. And that's kind of really resonated with me. It's like, even though I can go out there and talk about it and create hope based off lived experience, I'm not really sure where, which way I want to show up or how I want to contribute. But what I do know is I just want to have fun. A lot of my life hasn't been fun because I've been, caught up in my own problems and world. So now I just want to have fun and be free and laugh and do the things I want to love. And once I find my little niche of how I want to help people, I'll really nestle into that. But I'm sure it's going to change, John. I reckon if we spoke in 12 months, I'll be on a whole new path. And then another 2 years after that, it'll be a whole new path too.
when you look at, so Australia seems to be in this sort of love affair with gambling, right? The ads are so like targeted at young men, just like yourself, right? And puts it up as solve all your social problems, and the sport we love, the games we play, the clubs we're members of are all promoting gambling vigorously and powerfully to connect with us in the place we think and feel. What do we do about that, right? Like, can we prep to be resistant to that? Do we need to develop awareness? What's your thoughts on the Australian society making this a thing?
Yeah, got to be mindful here because I get angry and passionate about this topic. Yeah. 8-year-old kid can go to a local game of football and see 185 ads unconsciously to gamble. It's the war on drugs, and we all know that the negative impact that a drug can have on someone. I just think it's corrupt. There's agendas. It's money. It's part of the culture that we're in, and I think it is, and it will get taken down eventually. And I think in my lifetime, definitely, it will get taken down. And I think it's not about. There are countries in the world you can't gamble because they've got the intelligence to have realised how much of a problem it can be on society. And those governments that run those countries have one interest and one interest only, and that's the human beings that live in it, the quality of life that they live. Unfortunately, in our country and other countries, there's agendas and there's interests and there's money involved. So I think, I can sit here and be like, blame. No, don't blame. Take responsibility and fight if you truly believe in it. But then also on the other side of that coin is you got to take agency into your own life. Like you've got to, you can sit there and be like, well, it's normal to gamble and it's everywhere and that's not going to get you anywhere.
Yeah.
So to your 13-year-old little Shay out there right now who's just started gambling, or to the 55-year-old that is still going to Gambling Anonymous meetings, that still identifies as a gambling addict or a recovering gambling addict, which he's not. They're not. They're just a human being. They're not any of that. I would just say, just talk about it, because an addiction can't survive with light. And with shame, it will grow and it will fester and it will spread into every other area of your life. But just talk about it. Just talk about it. I'm not saying don't gamble either. I would never encourage, or my messaging to be, don't ever gamble. That's not my view on anything in life, to just be all or nothing. But just talk about it. If it's a problem, or if it's becoming a problem, or you're scared, or you're frustrated, or just talk about it. That's it.
Beautiful advice, mate, and it's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for offering such insight, both courageously sharing your journey, but also what you've learnt. You've really shone a light on so much stuff today that I'm just so amazed, and I just want to thank you sincerely for being here and opening up. Fantastic, mate.
Thank you, John. Cheers. I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me today.
Welcome, and thank you from Kintsugi Heroes and the listeners out there. So thanks. Shay Hare at Stories That Matter. We'll talk soon, mate. Good on you.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Kintsugi Heroes. Thank you to Colin Lilly for permission to use Broken as our theme music for this series. If you enjoyed this conversation, share the podcast with a friend and let us know by leaving a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support Kintsugi Heroes and the stories we share, head to kintsugiheroes.com.au and follow the instructions to make a tax-deductible donation. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.